Hey guys, so sometimes what happens when you are applying or looking for jobs and things, you sort of think, oh, that may just feel a little bit out of reach at the moment. So I think one really important thing to do with this is kind of just ask yourself, are you ready for this? And if you are, then great. How can you prove that? If you're not, what are some of the things that you can do to help get yourself into a position so you can almost walk that walk? So, can you emulate some of the things that other people are doing? So, first stage, it might be that you're sort of on this sort of start line, getting yourself prepared, looking at all the jobs that are available, and you just ask yourself, are you ready for this? So, that kind of classic thing of what do you want? Are you ready to step into the shoes that this is going to require? And if you're ready now, then absolutely great. But if you're not, how are you going to be in that position the next time that kind of similar job is advertised? So that's what we're going to go through. By the end of this, hopefully you'll have a really good idea of some of the things that you can do to step into those shoes. So I guess the stage is sort of where are you? So are you at the blocks? Have you got your qualifications? Have you added anything on there? Or are you kind of in that early phases where you maybe haven't got enough qualifications or you haven't got enough experiences, enough examples, haven't made enough mistakes yet? So you have to kind of step in and get that patient mileage. Are you immersed in a role already? So are you kind of doing things that will work towards that role in the future? So it might be that you're currently seeing some athletes in certain contexts. It might be lower level in academies. It might be that you're kind of volunteering somewhere to try and get some of the skills and shadowing people who are in that role. So you're getting prepared to be ready to be a really strong candidate when that job comes round. So then when that role is available, potentially now, potentially in the future, you're all ready to kind of hit the ground running and go from there. And I think it's sometimes really important, isn't it, to kind of recognize that actually sometimes we don't have enough experience to apply for something that's going to mean that when we hit that role, we're going to be ready. So it might be that it's a little bit too far out of reach. And what we don't want to do is apply for something that's so far within our comfort zone that we're not being pushed and challenged and given that sort of growth mentality. So you're going to kind of drive yourself forwards. You can have a little look at the picture on the right hand side. We've got the comfort zone, that sort of fear zone where you're starting to stretch yourself. We've then got that kind of learning zone and growth zone. And ideally what we should be doing is just slowly nudging that comfort zone bit by bit a little bit further. So dealing and how to work through new challenges, acquiring new skills. It's an ongoing process of learning, isn't it, from there? Because it's a horrible feeling. So I've had this a few times when I did my masters. I realized that, actually, even after 5 or 6 years of doing clinical practice, this really challenged me and really questioned some of the things that I had started to just form as part of my routine with certain patients. My clinical reasoning wasn't at the level that it should be. And actually doing these extra sort of things really kind of humbles you and puts you inside a place where you feel like, actually, there are changes and there are developments and growth that I need to do to be the best physio that I can possibly be. I've had that also as well when I stepped into sport. I felt like, gosh, I've been working for 7 or 8 years in and around clinical practice. I've been working part-time in a sort of professional-ish setup in a rugby club, but actually none of that replicated what was demanded in a full-time professional elite level sports team. So when I got in there, I didn't know a lot of the lingo and how to kind of manage a lot of the issues. So actually, it's really nice to keep pushing yourself. And actually, sometimes it's a really, really steep learning curve when you get in there. So be prepared to be a little bit humbled. And I think learning forms the basis of that, doesn't it, really? So if you're just constantly investing in yourself, learning, developing, challenging yourself, reflecting, you're going to start to pick up a lot of the skills that you require. And quite often what happens is you end up being recognized for that mentality, that work rate, that kind of passion comes oozing through when you go and apply for a job, and employers will recognize that. And actually, it's not always rock and roll, is it? That kind of discipline side can be a little bit boring. That's sitting and learning all your anatomy, all your kind of research that you're doing on an evening to try and prepare for the next day. It's not always rock and roll, is it? But actually, slowly what it builds is something really, really exciting. So yeah, starting sort of short-term vision and actually sort of working towards that over time is really important. And actually, who's done it before you is something that's worth having a little think about as well. So we've got a few classic people sort of that I've recognised in my life. We've got Will Smith, Ed Sheeran, and the main man, Derek, at the club. That I love and will always support. Will Smith is someone who got told no so many times, but he was really persistent, really believed in himself. You've got a Kanye kind of mentality, just kept on driving to make sure someone listened to his record, kept on turning up, kept sending it over and over again, doing things in the background to get that final shot. Ed Sheeran spent so much time at a really low level, just again, what looked at his competitors, what they were doing, and always tried to do that little bit more to try and get onto that scene and break into the music scene from there. And then you've got Derek, right, on the right-hand side there. Again, someone who's kind of stepped all the way through the different levels of sport to get to where he is now. So it doesn't always come easy. So it's, again, that sort of building it over time, just laying one brick at a time until you get there. So it really helps to show the employer that inner drive and enthusiasm that you have for this world. Just doing one or two things sporadically isn't the same as consistently working towards that end goal. Again, learning forms a massive part of that. So there's a clear kind of platform that we have in Grow Physio Academy that you can drive into. Have you been investing in yourself in qualifications, CPD stuff? You don't have to spend a fortune and have the gourmet certificates and everything, but actually what are the key things that role that you want to step into would be really useful. Have you gone and sought out some work experiences and learnings from other clinicians? Because sometimes if you've got a mentor, someone who's going to take you under their wing, a lot of those things are really useful. You can learn so much in clinical practice that you can't learn from the theory of reading a book. So again, what have you done? Have you done any volunteering that sits in that realm? Again, have a look online. There's always events that require expertise. And have you gone about putting some of that in place in times that maybe you could have just been sat on your backside or doing something unrelated? And again, have you reflected on this as well? So have you looked at the way that you've been behaving and acting, and does that fit with someone who you'd want to employ into this position? Because fundamentally, that person who's sitting opposite you, who's going to say yes or no for you getting the job, is going to ask that very question. Can they work with you? Is this someone who they want to work with? And is this going to be a long-term kind of relationship that you have? And if you're sort of fairly new into sort of these little tiny habit changes, this is a really good book that I recommend reading. So James Clear's written this, Atomic Habits. I'm sure you've heard of it. There's lots of similar variations to this, but just little changes that you can make on a daily basis that actually over time can have a huge bearing in terms of how you perform at interview. And the last little bit of this is just almost thinking as well about some of the things that are maybe sort of those obstructions or distractions, or as it's put here, interferences that might well affect your performance. Because actually you might have massive potential, but you've got all these distractions that are going on. And sometimes what you need to do is remove some of that interference and distraction. So what is it that's stopping you preparing as well as you possibly could for this role? It might be that you have to say no a little bit more to things. It might be that you have to almost step out of certain responsibilities in order to focus on what you truly want. So it goes back to the very beginning of this course, really, of what do you want? So where do you want to be? What kind of roles do you want to slot into, and go from there? And I guess just one example just to finish with is when I first applied for a role, my first ever role in full-time sport, I actually was unsuccessful. And I think the reason was pretty obvious. At the time, what they wanted was somebody who was wholeheartedly devoted to what the job was. So although I was doing a lot of the key things that I've just described there. So I was working full-time, and then I was doing an additional part-time role at Tynedale Rugby Club, which was basically a Tuesday, Thursday training, and then working on a Saturday. I'd I still felt committed, like I had more to do and offer to them. I didn't have someone who I'd trained up as someone to take over the reins. I had some Olympic Games and Commonwealth Games preparation stuff that was set up. I was finishing off my Masters, and that included a 6-week placement. So I guess just hand on heart, was I ready? I wasn't ready at that stage just to go, right, I'm wholeheartedly devoted. But what happened, luckily for me, was 2 years later, that same role came up at Newcastle Falcons, now Newcastle Red Bulls in Premiership Rugby. And actually, I'd done all those things. I'd completed them. My hunger and passion now was so clear that I wanted to wholeheartedly devote myself to this new role. I was happy to walk away from everything else. I was also feeling a little bit of frustration that kind of the things that I'd learned at that level were probably saturated, and I was ready to step into that role. So I think, yeah, was I ready? Hell yeah, I was ready. I was ready to kind of just, and I think that probably was a message really clearly put across at the interview. So again, it might be you're doing lots and lots of things that prep you, but the timing of when this comes can also be really important. I've had a similar situation with one of my students at the moment who's been offered a role working as a physio for their local football club, but actually they're not quite ready yet. And actually they were really apprehensive about saying no to it, but I was like, don't worry, there are always going to be roles like this that become available. So the timing, again, is absolutely key. So that's that. Short and sharp for this little section. Hope you enjoyed that. Next, we're going to go into kind of what to do in terms of shortlisting. So if you're shortlisted, how do you then go about prepping, and what does that even mean? So I'll see you in the next part, guys.